Hi, everyone. My name is Tali Reiner-Bodetsky. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Aid Coalition and a co-founder of Hope for Israel Alliance. Thank you for being with us today. Before we get started, while everyone is logging in, please let us know in the chat, where are you zooming in from? This webinar is produced by HIA and Aid Coalition. Aid Coalition is a U.S. not-for-profit organization whose mission is the strengthening and preserving the democratic foundation of the State of Israel. HIA is a grassroots Zionist movement led by volunteers across the world who advocates for the people of Israel against anti-Semitism and, most importantly, the campaign for the release of the hostages held by Hamas. Today, we mark 723 days that 48 hostages are still held in hell. We keep fighting for them until the last one will return home. For more information about HIA and Aid Coalition, please follow the links in the chat. It's nice to see we have people from Baltimore, I see, from Rockville, from Brookline, Massachusetts. Great to see you all here. We usually think of Israel and the Middle East as issues decided far away in Washington or Jerusalem, but in reality, they show up right here in our own towns and cities across the country. We've seen city councils, school boards, and state party committees take position on Israel and the war. Sometimes they call for ceasefires, arm embargoes, or adopting various definitions of anti-Semitism. These decisions may be symbolic, but for many of us, this is personal. When a city council passes a resolution that feels one-sided, or when a local candidate makes statements that question Israel's legitimacy, it affects our sense of belonging and safety. At the same time, when local governments take a stand against anti-Semitism or strengthen security for synagogues and school, it affirms that our voice matter. And that's why local elections matter so much. And this is why we are here today. And to get us started, I have a quick questions for all of you. And hopefully we'll have a poll popping up now. Do you normally vote in your local elections? I don't know how many of us do that, and I would love for us to know more. Today, we'll dive into this connection between the local politics and international issues and explore how we can respond and make a difference. And we are lucky to have with us today three incredible people. Natan Guttman. Hi, Natan.
Hi.
Thank you for
Thanks
being
having
with
me.
us. He is the U.S. correspondent for the Israeli Broadcasting Corporation, Kan 11. Among many other positions, Natan was also previously the Washington correspondent for the Forward and the Jerusalem Post and others. We have also Ariel Averbuch. Hi, Ariel.
How you doing?
Ariel is an attorney and also the founder of an organization called the Sword of Gideon, a civilian-led intelligence initiative dedicating to protecting communities and nations from the threat of radical Islam. And last but not least, we have Rachel present. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Tara.
Rachel previously worked in the US Congress and was a lobbyist for the Jewish Federation System. Rachel has worked on marketing strategy in both profit and not-for-profit sectors, and she is a political activist in the Rochester community. So sounds like we have a group of activists in our crowd. I see that most of you have been participating in local elections, which is amazing. And we hope after this session, you'll understand more about the importance of these elections, specifically now, and what you can do to also advocate for others to participate in the elections. So let's get started with a general question to our panel. Why should the Jewish communities and all those who care about Israel pay close attention to local elections and not just the national ones? What's changed, if anything? Natan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me, first of all, and for the question. I think very briefly that elections are always important, whatever they are, national elections, primaries, local elections. It's always good to vote because you don't know what issue will come up. But I think specifically what we're seeing now, and we'll see more of it next year in the midterms, is that the issue of Israel is popping up more frequently on the local level. Um, as you said, it used to be an issue between Washington and Israel and the lobbyists and the Jewish organizations. Now it's everywhere. And because it's such an emotional issue since October 7th, we are seeing all these local initiatives come up. And if you really want to impact them, you should be there and you should vote, whether it's for even for school councils, because the school curriculum can reflect things that you either like or don't like, for mayoral and county elections, whatever you have, because right now what we're seeing is that the issue of Israel is seeping into all these levels, whether it's schools or localities, and they have the power to influence local academic institutions and business cooperation, and so on and so forth. So definitely, I think now more than ever is the time to get involved in these things.
Thank you, Natan. Ariel?
Yeah, sure. So I 100% agree with Nathan. And I would also add that our organization has basically found out that the city council is just another front, another battlefield that we have. I'll elaborate a bit later about how it's done, but I'll just explain in 2 words that this is just another front aimed at economically impacting Israel. And most people don't even know this. It's not just that it matters. Most people are not aware of how much it matters. So yeah, we have to pay attention to what's going on locally.
Yeah, and I'm excited to deep down on that later. Rachel?
First of all, thank you also, Tali, for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and I certainly agree with everything that Ariel and Natan both said. The other thing that I would note is I think that local elections really have the potential to serve to bring communities together and to bring Jewish communities together, both within the Jewish community and with our allies. And I think that that is also really important at this critical moment in Israel's future, in the American future, bringing people together and being able to unify a large group is maybe more critical than it's ever been. And I think local elections can offer a real opportunity to do that and to bring in people who might not otherwise engage.
Yeah, community is very important, especially during these days. So Nathan, I want to ask you now, I know you've been following the mayoral race in New York very closely, and I think by now most of us have heard about the name Mamadani, and just a few hours ago we heard there's some changes going on in the race. But please help us understand what exactly is going on there. What are the various viewpoints? Should we be concerned? And what do these elections have to do with Israel?
Okay, sure. That's a lot to unpack, but I'll try to do it briefly, and we can always go back to it in questions and answers. And I should just emphasize that I'm not an activist or a member of any organization. I'm just here as a journalist who is covering these issues. So first of all, today's news, the news from the past hour is that the map of this race is changing slightly. Eric Adams, the sitting mayor of New York, has announced that he's dropping out of the race, which leaves basically Zoran Mamdani as the Democratic candidate who is leading the polls, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor who is running as an independent, and Curtis Silwa, who is running as a Republican. So let's do the news first and then go back maybe to what it means. basically by Adams dropped out because he reached a conclusion, which he probably should have reached months ago, that he doesn't have any chance of winning. The numbers weren't there. He was polling at 5 to 7 to 8%. But what does that mean for the race itself? Mamdani has a huge lead in the polls. According to the latest polls I'm looking here, he has anywhere between a 15 to 22% advantage over his next rivals. Now, this would change now because a lot of the voters who wanted to vote for Eric Adams will switch their vote probably to Andrew Cuomo. That is kind of the anti-Mamdani vote, even though Adams himself didn't endorse any candidate in his announcement today. But even if they all switch to Andrew Cuomo, this doesn't really change the map. It just means that Mamdani's lead will be smaller, but he still seems very safe. It could, however, shake up the campaign and maybe cause more differences in the future. Right now, I don't see this as a game changer. So we're heading into an election in which Zoran Mamdani is the favorite candidate to win. There is a lot of sense of concern that I'm hearing from Jewish activists, from pro-Israel activists, from Israelis, a lot of communal oy vey over Mamdani. Try to unpack just a little bit of it. You all know Zoran Mamdani. I think it's safe to say that he's an anti-Israel candidate. He's very critical of Israel, makes no secret of that. In fact, that is part of his ticket. He supports BDS. He supports certain forms of academic boycott on Israel. And his statements are very tough as far as it concerns Israel, and we'll get to a few of them in a second. Regarding the issue of Israel's right to exist, which I don't know why that even is an issue. He states that he supports that, but when asked if he thinks that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, he says that he does not support the idea of ethno-states or states in which one group has any kind of advantage over the other. Now, here's one key question about Zoran Mamdani. We know that he's anti-Israel. Is he anti-Semitic? Where does that line cross? Where does he cross that line? Now, we can argue for weeks about the definitions and the lines. I'll just point out a few data points that where does this thing come up? I mean, national organizations like the ADL think that he is anti-Semitic. Many Jewish voters that support him think that he is not. I would say when we talk about that, we look usually at a couple of issues. Key to them is his refusal to denounce the saying globalize the Intifada. Globalize the Intifada is used by protesters in the past 2 years across America and around the world. He said that he doesn't personally use that term himself, but he will not call on people to not to use it. It is an issue here because, and there is nuance, it's a matter a little bit of interpretation. For Israelis and for many Jewish Americans, this is a trigger. The idea of globalizing the Intifada means for them, oh, that thing that we went through in 2001, the buses being bombed, the terror attacks, now they want to globalize that. They want to bring it all over America. There's another interpretation, which is saying, Intifada means uprising, means resistance. We want to globalize the resistance to the pro-Israel movement and has nothing to do with violence. Now, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but you can't ignore the fact that for many Israelis, it is very triggering, and that is one of the issues that comes up. The other issue that always comes up is his saying that he will, if and when elected mayor, he will deny Benjamin Netanyahu the right of arriving in New York. And if Bibi Netanyahu comes to New York, as he's in New York right now, actually, as he does every year, at least for the UN General Assembly, he will send the NYPD to arrest him. And that, of course, really grabs the headlines when someone says that. We should note that he probably doesn't have any authority to do that. You cannot arrest a foreign leader based on indictment in the International Criminal Court in the United States, because the United States is not part of the International Criminal Court. Therefore, there is no apparent legal basis to do that. But it sounds good. So,
You
right now,
explain, I guess, the support of some of the Jewish organization and Jewish politicians that they are supporting him.
yes, so definitely he has a lot of Jewish support as well. I think the latest poll that I saw was among Jewish New Yorkers, 43% plan to vote for Mamdani. It goes up to 67% when you look at younger voters. He has an appeal. And I would say, and again, I'm sure we can get into that also. I don't want to take up too much time. A couple of things about that. First of all, it means that for many Jewish Americans, the issue of Israel isn't the key issue. They're voting for a mayor. They like what he has to offer. They deeply dislike the other candidates. And what he has to offer is a vision for working class Americans and New Yorkers, in ways to deal with housing issues, with education, with transportation, all these things that fit into kind of a pro-socialist agenda. That is part of it. The other part of it is that they too are critical of Israel. I mean, these numbers pretty much reflect where the Jewish community stands on the issue of Israel, especially of the Gaza war right now. The Gaza war has driven a wedge between Israel and the Jewish community. More Jews are critical, more Jews believe in pressuring Israel. So his views, even though they're more extreme than most of Jewish Americans, aren't that much out of the realm of what they believe in anyways. So that is part of this discussion. And I would say, just so we can wrap this part up, this is all this oy vey justified? Should we, or should Jewish voters or pro-Israel voters be worried about this? So first of all, yeah, of course, it's not good news for anyone if New York City, the biggest city in America, the most important city in the world, elects a mayor who is definitely anti-Israel and really wants to act on that. That's never good news. But you have to ask yourself, how much of this will really happen? How significant? What kind of difference will it make in practice? It will make a difference, but again, things like arresting Bibi Netanyahu won't happen. But of course, expect less cooperation in terms of business, culture, academic ties between New York City and Israel. That is something significant. I think if there is a reason for concern or to pay attention to this, is because Zoran Mamdani may be the extreme left of where American politics stand right now, but he represents a movement. And in other elections and across America, whether it's municipal or local or even national, you will be seeing more and more people who adopt part of these positions, who are very critical of Israel. That's what used to be the progressive far left of the Democratic Party is more mainstream right now. So Zoran Mamdani may be a little bit out there, and that's why it's easy for him to draw the attention, but he's not that far and not that out of sync with where Democrats are right now. And just look who's endorsing him: Jerry Nadler, Governor Hochul. So yeah, it's definitely he's a little bit of an outlier, but not that much. So I'll stop now, maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. I mean, that's really, really interesting to see that analysis. And you were talking about him supporting the BDS and the implication that might cause. And I think this is a great time to move to Ariel. And I'll ask you this. I mean, we've heard a lot about the BDS movement, mainly on college campuses, I think. We've been hearing that for years, but we didn't really feel it until recently. And how does that really play out in city councils, in local governments, and other places? What should we look for when we're talking about, the BDS movement?
Yeah, so thank you for this question. Basically, I would say I thought about a metaphor that can suit this situation. This is like a person having a headache or a migraine, very focused on the migraine, whilst he has like a stage 4 cancer being spread in his body. So BDS on campuses is the migraine. Everybody's looking at it. It causes a lot of noise. But what's really worrying is what's happening in city halls. That's why I said it's just another battlefront. So what I'm talking about here, and I assume many of the people here, this is going to be the first time they're going to hear about what I'm just going to expose right now. And there's a purpose why nobody has heard of it, is basically that we were able to uncover that the BDS operates a shadow network of organizations that infiltrate city halls, and they target mayors and council members, and many times with very little resistance, if any. What they do, their goal is to basically launder legitimacy for extremist groups and bypass the national laws. All right. So what they do is they are organized to agitate. They're organized in a way that they have mobile apps, they have scripted speeches, they have also traveling operatives and precise instructions on how to bird dog and harass city council members and politicians, also how to avoid arrests, all sorts of stuff. What they want to achieve when they reach a city hall is they want to achieve one of two goals. It's either the twinning process, twinning with other cities, which is named sister city resolutions. And basically, I have to be honest, the first time I've heard of a sister city thingy, I thought it was a cute thing. You know, it's like a declaratory thing. What's the big deal? So apparently, when you twin with a city, you're basically able to come up with joint projects and transfer funds. So when they twin with a city in Palestine, whether it's Gaza or Nablus or other cities, they're basically able to take funds from the budget of a city and transfer it directly to Gaza, to the hands of Hamas. And we've seen that in action. So they have hidden agendas. They have this way of presenting it in a sneaky humanitarian way, and they bypass national policies and are able to.
So we can see, I just want to emphasize this, we can see our taxes go to Gaza and directly towards Hamas.
Exactly. And this is actually the point where I have to emphasize, this is not an Israeli Jewish problem. This should be of concern of any resident of any city in the world, because this is not only in the US. We've seen this happening in the UK, in France, in Australia, in Canada. When I say they are highly organized, that's what I mean. They actually developed a special app to mobilize activists towards city halls. They know exactly who to target, what to say, who to turn to, and they want to transfer funds. They can also have transfer of resources, of reputation, and twinning is only one of the things that they try to achieve. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but they are also focused on city council resolutions, and they have targeted divestment. They're basically, so another thing that at the beginning I wasn't aware of, and the Sword of Gideon is focused solely on this, is I wasn't aware that a city hall has the power to direct the investment strategy of all the pensions and 401ks of all the city's employees. So this could sum up to hundreds of millions of dollars per city, and they can divest from Israeli companies. They'll never come and say, let's divest from Israeli companies. They're going to say something like, let's have an environmentally friendly, economical investment strategy. And they give a list of companies which don't fall under that category. 95% of those are Israeli companies. Or they want to reach some sort of a public condemnation, show solidarity with Gaza, so they try to pass resolutions. And as Nathan mentioned, boycotts, all right? They try to pass resolutions of boycotting, whether it's cultural or educational. So this is something that they're doing. When they're successful, it rarely makes national news because it's local. And that's why most people are not aware that it's happening. They're also keen on having cities have an apartheid-free zone, zones which don't purchase or don't sell products from Israel. So that's why they are so keen on labeling Israel as an apartheid, because they're not going to say Israel-free zones. They're going to say apartheid-free zones. Yeah, and every council member will agree, yeah, apartheid is a bad thing. And so they pass these types of resolutions.
Do you know how much of these are also affecting the school districts? I mean, I know us in Philadelphia, we've been having this issue. We see them trying to affect the education of our children. What do you see?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we see it also, obviously, not just in the general council, like the general city hall council, it's also happening in the commissions themselves, because every city council has commissions. So they're basically also approaching the commissions. They are super organized. I don't know if you can see this, but they have all sorts of toolkits in various languages, because it happens in various countries. And every activist knows which commission to turn to, what to say, how to bird dog the council members to get their thing, and they're affecting the education and the divestment, as I mentioned, all sorts of stuff. And we are only now gathering all the information to realize how big of a phenomenon this really is. It's extremely troubling, I have to be honest with you. But the good thing is that for once, we're now showing resistance. And unlike social media, this is not a matter of numbers. They do come with big numbers, but you don't need big numbers in order to stop them. We just need to expose it, and they can be stopped. So I would also encourage every person here, especially the ones who are hearing of this for the first time, to just Google what's happening in your specific city hall. Google Action Network, Palestine or Gaza, with the name of your city, and you can see things that will come up, which might be very troubling for everybody here.
Thank you, Ariel. Now, I want to ask Rachel, because Ariel mentioned, that we don't need a lot to succeed in these battles. And Rachel, who is someone who is deeply engaged in political activism, can you tell us about what happened in Rochester and your success? What happened in that case, and what kind of strategies maybe you can share with us that help to mobilize the Jewish community and the allies for the Jewish community around local elections?
Sure, absolutely. So, I want to say maybe a year before the primary happened, so Rochester, the city of Rochester, doesn't have a real large Jewish community. Most of the Jewish community is in two suburbs, and there's one main suburb, which is called Brighton. And after October 7th, there was some really troubling activity that took place, particularly the town center is right next to the middle school and the high school. And there were protesters who were holding up really like bloody, sort of child killer signs. And they would wait for children to be on their way home from school and start screaming at Jewish children walking home from school about killing babies and about the blood on their hands. It was really a horrifying experience for children, for kids walking home from school. And the community came up with sort of a permitting law that required people to request a permit for a certain number of people to hold a protest to make the police aware. The town has its own police force, and the permit was very carefully crafted with attorneys to make sure that it wasn't going to restrict freedom of speech, but would still allow for the protection of our children, and specifically around schools at dismissal times, to allow children to get home safely without being harassed. And in response to that, there was one particular town council member who had a troubling past before October 7th. She had pictures with Linda Sarsour, had, her arm around Linda Sarsour, had really run up against the Jewish community a number of times, but she wouldn't make a statement after October 7th, even before all of this started. She had really sort of butted heads with the community, but the permitting law, I would say, it became clear to us that the town council wasn't just sort of this thing that we all took for granted that just, makes sure that the trash gets picked up and the leaves are handled and the roads are clear of snow in the winter, but really was a place that we needed to turn to as a community to protect our children, to protect ourselves, and we saw what was happening across the world. So in the city of Rochester, in December of 2023, there was already a ceasefire resolution. Many members of the Jewish community spoke on the ceasefire resolution, pointing out that the city of Rochester has a tremendous number of problems, including incredibly high rates of crime and poverty, and might want to focus on those issues. But it became clear to us that there was a lot of hatred of the community and that there was a need to do something. We realized that the following spring, I want to say it was May, was going to be a primary where the town council member who had come up against the community was going to be up for re-election, and determined that it was important for the community to not have her be re-elected. Because in Brighton, there is no Republican Party to speak of, really, it was realized that the decision was going to be made in the primary, the same way that it was for Mamdani in Brighton was going to be the situation. And so many, many months in advance of the primary, we started planning, and we were able to identify a really strong candidate who we felt better reflected the values of the community. The woman we were looking to unseat is a Black woman who was very, very focused on her racial identity. And the woman that we found who ran is a Latina, an Argentinian woman who happens to be a Jewish mom in the community and is an incredibly powerful woman in her own right. And so as a community, we started to organize very early and to get people to know who our candidate was. She was active in the community, but the first time you run for office is hard. So I would say, so to sort of cut to the end of it, she won in the primary by a lot. She and our other preferred candidate. So there were two people who were going to win, and we really needed both people to win, and this third person to not win. And that was what happened, which was really incredibly exciting. It was a huge victory, even though it's just for the Brighton Town Council. And I really would chalk it up to a few things. I would say the community found someone outstanding. So if you look at Andrew Cuomo, I don't think I've heard anyone say that he's outstanding. I don't think I've heard anyone really articulate his vision. So our magnificent candidate, her name is Clara Sanguinetti. Clara had a very strong, coherent vision for the future, and it was not a vision that was focused on this stuff. It wasn't about anti-Semitism and about Israel. It was, I'm running for the town council. I want us to be focused on the town council. It was a very positive vision. And we found that people were much better able to get behind positivity and community and a message of a better future than the other candidate who really, really went negative and sort of started spouting some conspiracy theories and that kind of thing. And the other thing is that our candidate did the work. So she knocked an unbelievable number of doors. My kids were hanging lawn signs. There were lawn signs. You've never seen so many lawn signs for a town council primary. I mean, you would have thought this was the presidential election, every street. And we were really well organized, and it worked.
Were you surprised, I guess, of being such a small Jewish community, that you could make that change?
Yes, we were surprised. It was really not about the Jewish issues. Clara was the candidate who was backed by the Jewish community. Clara and her running mate was a woman called Christine, who is not Jewish also. Clara is, but Christine is not. We were surprised, but we really brought together all of our allies. So, for instance, the Indian community was and is a strong ally of our Jewish community. We knocked every single door of everybody and we talked to people. So for something like a primary campaign for a town council, I don't think a lot of people have historically voted. It's just such a small election that people don't tend to get out and vote for it. And in this case, the Get Out the Vote operation was extraordinary. I worked on Barack Obama's campaign in 2008, and it was like that. We knew exactly who had voted. from when we had to petition and we were going door to door in blustery snow to talk to people about Clara's vision, and Clara was going door to door. We did all of the groundwork, and it was really, really systematic. So you can't count on, you can't make any assumptions. You have to actually get out there, do the work, talk to everybody. And I think the other piece is that while the Israeli American community is not always super involved in the Jewish community, in this case they were. And the messaging that we did, the people who were involved in organizing, a lot of them were Israeli. And so there was support from the Israeli community, from the Reform community, from the Orthodox community. It was really an effort of community members coming together around this issue. And we even still see the results. People are still excited about Clara. And so I think it's great because she'll be on the town council. And it's also great because it brought together the town around a positive message about the future.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Bringing in the community and also, I guess, bringing in your allies, that what at the end made that difference, right? Not focusing.
And running a really strong candidate. I can't emphasize that enough. I have a number of friends who are really excited about Mamdani. I haven't heard anyone who's excited about Cuomo. People who are going to vote for him are sort of going to hold their nose and check a box. People were really excited to go to the polls and vote for Clara. And my kids were excited. They weren't the only ones who were excited. It really became a big deal and an exciting thing to be a part of. And I think that makes a big difference when people can really rally behind the candidate who they're voting for and not just sort of do it to get it done.
Amazing. A lesson to us all, I think. Thank you, Rachel. Now I want to move to some questions from the audience. Natan, there's a question here, if you can comment on it. How do you think the young Jews view Mamdani's approach about Israel? And do you think that, they just accept him because of all the other things he talks about and they just look away, or do they accept his views?
I think there are several factors here. First of all, by the way, just as Rachel mentioned, the Democratic establishment offered very little in terms of presenting attractive candidates. They just threw on New Yorkers mayor who was a failed mayor, involved in criminal activities and cutting up to Trump, and a former governor who was kicked out because of his personal and professional activities. And they say, oh, why don't you support us? So first of all, that's part of it. Part of it is that Mamdani is really, he has no serious competitor right now. People might vote against him, but they're not voting for the other guy. That's part of it. Part of it has to do with the fact that, they're not voting for the Secretary of State of the United States or the president or the member of Congress. Local issues, domestic issues matter much more. So the issue of Israel could be a turnoff or could be a threshold issue. But in general, you want your mayor to take care of the mayoral issues, the city issues, and he's offering a vision that others don't, especially for young voters who are traditionally less established financially, who are still struggling, especially in a city like New York. And he's offering them real solutions. They may work, they may not work, but there's something there, and that's attracting them. And then you get to the issue of Israel. So some of them actually like the fact that he's critical of Israel. And I'll go back to what I said before. He's way out there, but he's not out of sync with what many American Jews, many Americans, many Democrats are thinking. Israel is no longer an issue of consensus. The Gaza war is not something that Jewish Americans rally around right now. So what he has to offer is attractive in that sense. And even though he's more extreme than probably most of his Jewish supporters, he's not that extreme to an extent that that will turn them off from voting for him. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I
Concerning.
jump in on that, Tali?
Yeah, sure.
I think Natan is absolutely right. I think young Americans who are despairing of the war in Gaza, who dislike the Netanyahu government, who, if they were Israelis, would be out on the street protesting, don't see another way. And I think that the organized Jewish community, of which I'm a part, and so I share in this guilt, hasn't really offered a solution that says you can be Jewish, you can be committed, and here is an alternative to the government of Israel. You can love Israel and not the government. And when I tell people, I only moved back to the States almost 2 years ago from Israel after 14 years. And when I tell people that I was out every single week protesting with my kids, 3 days before I gave birth, I was protesting because I love Israel, I oppose Netanyahu's government, that's really not a voice that's heard very often. And I think what we're seeing in terms of the support for Mamdani and for candidates like him is a reflection of the fact that the Jewish community hasn't offered an alternative to allegiance to the government of Israel.
Yeah, a very extreme reaction. So we have a few questions for you, Ariel, about people want to understand what's exactly the process around the BDS in city councils, and how can they learn, more about how to handle it and how to oppose it.
Right. So the good thing about the US is that everything should be transparent, especially city hall meetings agendas. So I'll put in the chat the text that you should put in Google and just write Action Network, Gaza or Palestine and the name of your city, and you might find things that are happening in your city that you were not aware of. So the first thing is just awareness. That's what we do. Just bring this into the awareness of the public. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not necessarily related to Israel or even Jews. This is related to every resident that should worry what's happening with their funds and where they're going, because basically city council members are elected to, fix the elementary school or the hole in the road, not to invest in some foreign conflict in the Middle East. So the first thing is to know what's happening. The second thing is, if you do find something that might be troubling, is to actually go to those meetings. They're open to the public, get to know what's happening, and just inform yourself. You don't have to participate. You can just sit in the audience and see what's happening. Many of them are also broadcasted via Zoom. You can log on from your house and just see what's happening. The problem is, and I saw a question here about anti-BDS laws in many states, is that they are much more sneaky than that. They don't come up and say, let's boycott Israel. They're going to come up and say, let's pass a resolution in which our city invests in peace economy, or in which our city invests in environmentally conscious companies, right? And they sneak in all stuff that BDS is basically aims to achieve, and that's divestment from Israel. So I saw somebody mentioning Boston here. We're very active in Boston as well. There's a lot going on there. So yeah, it is troubling.
So do we have any organization or place today that flags these things? They're seemingly not that obvious.
Yes, it's called the Sword of Gideon. That's what we do. And I just had a meeting with my team a few weeks ago, and I told them, listen, we are the best organization to deal with this. And they were looking at me like in awe, like, why? And I said, because we're the only ones. So we're cooperating with other ones, but basically we're the ones who have taken it upon ourselves to just gather all this information and actually share with other cities what had worked in other cities. And that's the thing. Some cities were able to block all sorts of vicious resolutions, and we share that information with other cities. We gather the information, we see what's going on. That's why I can tell you they're highly organized, because we see exactly what's going on everywhere. So yeah, that's what we do.
I would also really
Great.
encourage people to build relationships with legislators at all levels. So when I was working for a member of Congress in Washington who was very well regarded, I saw that she would turn to the people that she trusted and ask their opinions and ask their advice, and she had her go-tos for different issues. So if people have an opportunity to sit down, even when there's nothing on the table that has to do with BDS, sit down with your local council member, sit down with your local whatever role they have, and introduce yourself. Tell them why this matters to you. What did October 7th mean to you? Why do you care? Become a person that they can trust and a person that they are going to look to for advice and who is in their corner. And then when these issues come up, that's not the point at which you want to be introducing yourself. That's the point at which you want to be leveraging an already existing relationship.
Absolutely.
It's building those relationships and those in the communities is really number one to find those right candidates for one, right? And to be in those places that make the change. If we don't have any more questions in the chat or in the Q&A, sorry. I'll ask this. What do you think, you know, the Jewish community can do more to avoid these situations? I mean, I know in most cases, I know in our case, like the Jewish federations, the organizations, they don't want to, you know, deal with politics. They're afraid to get their hands messy. But it seems like and this is maybe part of the reason we're behind in organizing ourselves. How do you see the Jewish organizations get their foot in the game in a more organized fashion? How can we do that without getting into politics? Nathan, you're on mute.
I can give it a try, even though I'm not, again, involved in any organization or anything like that. I would say that, first of all, there's no reason to avoid politics. I mean, this is a political game, and the Jewish community can play this game like anyone else. So yeah, you mobilize, you support candidates and resolutions and issues that you support, you oppose others, you show up to meetings, and that's how things change, and no reason to be afraid of doing so. Politics is part of the game, and Israel is a political issue, like it or not. I would also say, just on a more general note, that I think everyone involved in this issue has to come to grips with the idea that Israel is a divisive issue now. The days of just automatic support for Israel or automatic opposition to Israel no longer exist. You can't take anything for granted. So I would say whatever you believe in and whatever you want to advance, you just have to dive into the issues and deal with them, with the specifics of them. And going back to Mamdani, because first of all, that's what I'm here for, and also because he is the most extreme element of them all right now. Mamdani is not going to become, he'll probably be the next mayor of New York, and he probably won't be the Zionist mayor of New York, and he won't be a pro-Israel mayor. And he's entitled to his views, and his voters are as well. If you care about your specific issues that regarding that have to do with Israel, you have to actually engage on these issues. And like on the issue of academic boycott, he has a little bit of a nuanced approach. He believes in organizational academic boycott, but not personal ones. So like you shouldn't cooperate with Israeli academic institutions, but you're no problem with having this or that professor come over and speak. You can disagree with that totally. I'm just saying there are nuances there, and there are issues in which you can work with the candidates, even candidates that do not support Israel and officials that do not support Israel, to make sure that specific issues are okay. If you know of someone who is supporting giving money to Hamas or is actively giving money to Hamas, of course you have vehicles of dealing with that. Blanket a rejection of anyone from Chuck Schumer to the left won't really lead to any results, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of, issues in the community between the parties. So people are having a hard time right now, both with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. It seems like, the normal ideals of these parties, specifically in local elections, aren't really relevant, right? Just looking into the candidates and looking at their value system and what they bring forward seems like a better approach. I mean, someone asked here how to address pressuring to pick a side if we have a candidate that's a mega politician or would be in a Democratic side. But I think, whether they're Republican or not, or Democratic, sometimes it's not relevant when we're talking about school boards or city councils. Sometimes these are local issues that don't really have the affiliation of the party. That's what I see in our local candidates.
And if people are interested in sort of a case study, I think the movement that's maybe been the most successful at this is the anti-reproductive choice movement. They have gotten officials in at every level of the American government who want to restrict women's ability to make choices about their own bodies, women's reproductive rights. And it's been really at every level of the government and regardless of parties. So it's mostly Republicans who have supported their efforts, but not entirely. And they have backed Democratic candidates where they've said, we are anti-choice and anti-women. And they have been hugely successful at that. AIPAC has also done a really good job of building relationships with politicians. I don't know that in the last few years it's been quite as successful or that they do it on every single level just because resources are limited and we're such a small group. But the anti-choice activists are a very, very interesting case study in how to push your issue forward.
Yeah, because Israel used to be a bipartisan issue, right?
It did. It was a wonderfully bipartisan issue. And the prime minister decided that there were other things that were more important than keeping it that way.
So it's on us. It's on us to support Israel and make sure this topic stays a bipartisan issue. That's my thoughts. Any last remarks?
I think it's really important to broaden the definition of what it means to be pro-Israel. I think it's critical that it be possible to be opposed to Israel's current government and love Israel. I recently wrote a piece in my own universe on this about how much I love Israel and how deeply opposed I am to the current government. And I think that when we narrow our scope and narrow what it means to be pro-Israel, we lose out. We lose out on people who could be brought in, on people who could care, on people who have a broader definition of being pro-Israel. And I would encourage people to broaden the definition of what that term means.
Yeah, definitely. And just the fact that there are other ways to deal with, foreign policies without boycotting, right? I don't know how much these boycotts, I know how much these boycotts affect, at the end, they affect individuals and not necessarily the governments that they're trying to affect. So, So with that, I just want to thank our amazing panel, Ariel, Rachel, and Nathan. Thank you so much for being with us today, and to all of the audience. And I hope everyone can see that being a part of the democratic process is important at any level, the local, the state, the federal level, the national level. And especially with local elections, we must vote based on the values of the different parties and the different candidates, and just look beyond their official parties. So I want to thank all of you for joining us. And in these coming weeks, leading to the second memorial of October 7th massacre, we have prepared for you 2 amazing programs. Next Sunday on October 5th, we will talk with 2 bereaved parents about the meaning of, rising up from this horrific moment in their life. And on October 7th, please join us for a live broadcast of the National Memorial Ceremony. We will have a live English translation for that. So please look out for the announcement about these events and join us to stand together with the families of October 7th. And with that, I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.